Hey everybody, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to tackle something that I think we all struggle with a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, expressing the future in English.
I see.
Specifically will and going to.
Oh, yeah.
And for this deep dive, we're going to be looking at a really interesting English learning podcast I found.
Oh,
And they did a really good job, I think, of laying out this whole concept.
down to it.
And so we're going to kind of go through their points, but also add in our own thoughts and experiences and stuff as well.
Right.
So to start off, I think it's worth mentioning that they begin by talking about some key vocabulary words
Oh, okay.
that relate to the future.
Yeah, I mean, vocabulary is so important.
It is.
It's really the foundation of any language.
Absolutely.
If you don't have the words, you can't make the sentences.
Exactly.
You can't have the conversation.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. So they have a list of 8 words.
8 words.
I'm not going to go through all
Yeah.
of them, but just to give you an idea. Plan, predict, schedule, decide, later, soon, next, and later on.
Oh, wow. So they're really thinking about the different ways that we use to conceptualize the future.
Exactly.
Not just the grammar,
Exactly.
but the vocabulary that surrounds it.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point because when you think about those words, they all kind of have that sense of time. Like something's going to happen later, or, you're making plans for something, or you're scheduling something.
Yeah.
So it's not just about will and going to.
Yeah.
It's also about all those other words that are surrounding them that kind of add to that
Right.
time element.
Yeah, it's all part of painting that picture with language.
Exactly.
I like that.
Okay, so let's get into it. Will versus going to.
All right.
What's the deal?
What is the deal?
Why are they both there?
Why are they both there?
When do we use one? When do we use the other?
Right.
So the podcast makes this point, which I think is really good, which is they're both correct. It's not like one's right and one's wrong.
Right.
It's more about context.
Choosing the one that's right for what you want to say.
Exactly.
For the context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe we can start with will.
Sure.
So what are some situations where we might use will?
Well, let me ask you this.
Okay.
If you look outside and you see some dark clouds rolling in,
Oh.
what might you say?
I'd probably say, I think it's going to rain.
Right.
Or I think it will rain.
Exactly.
Include?
Right. So in that situation, you're making a prediction.
Yes.
And you're using will because
Yes.
it's kind of a spontaneous thought
Okay.
based on what you're seeing.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's one way we use will
Okay, cool.
to make a prediction about something that we think might happen in the future.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right, and what about going to?
Okay, so going to is often used to talk about plans or intentions.
Okay.
So, for example, what if you were talking to a friend and you wanted to tell them about your plan for tonight?
I might say, I'm going to study English tonight
Perfect.
for this episode.
That's that.
Please should have been doing that.
Right, so you've already decided.
Yeah.
You have this intention you're going to study.
Yes.
And so you use going to express that.
Okay, so like premeditated going to.
Yes,
Will is more spontaneous.
exactly.
Okay.
So there's a distinction there.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay.
Now, I also wanted to point out that sometimes we use will for things that aren't just predictions.
Oh.
Like sometimes we use them for willingness or for making promises.
Oh, tell me more about that.
So, for example, if someone says, hey, can you help me move this weekend? I'm like, yeah, I'll help you.
Right.
I'm not just predicting the future.
You're not just saying, I think I will help you.
Right.
You're saying, I'm willing to help you.
I'm promising.
Yes.
I'm going to do it.
And that makes a difference
It does make a difference.
in how it's received.
Yeah, because if you just say, yeah, I think I will help you, it's like, well,
Maybe not.
right?
I'll see how I feel.
Exactly.
But I'll help you is like, I'm there.
You're there for them.
You can count on me.
It's more emphatic.
Yeah. It's a stronger statement for sure.
It is. It's interesting, isn't it, how these subtle little changes
Yeah.
can really make a difference in the meaning.
Absolutely. And this is something that I think as English learners, we don't always pick up on right away.
Yeah, it takes time.
It does.
It takes experience.
Yeah. And it's hard to learn that from a textbook.
You need to hear it in context.
You need to hear it.
You need to experience it.
You need to use it
Exactly.
and make those mistakes.
Absolutely.
And the podcast actually brings up another interesting point about will, which is sometimes it can be used for habitual actions,
Oh, really?
which is
Yeah.
not something that I thought about.
Yeah.
So they gave the example of he will often go for a run in the morning.
Okay.
It's like a pattern of behavior
Right. It's something he does regularly.
regularly. So will can be used for that too.
Yeah, it's like a little bit of like a secret use of will.
Yeah.
It's not as common,
Right.
but it is possible.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and I feel like the more we dig into this,
Yeah.
the more we're realizing that there are all these like subtle
Nuances. Layers
layers.
to these words.
Exactly. And it's not as simple as just like, oh, use this one for this and use that one for that.
Exactly.
There's more to it.
There's more to it for sure.
Okay.
And going to can also be used for predictions as well.
Oh, right.
But it's a different kind of prediction.
It is.
So the example that the podcast gave was, imagine a runner
Okay.
at the starting line of a race,
Okay.
and they say, I'm going to win this race.
Ooh.
That's a prediction, but it's not just, oh, I think I'm going to win.
Right.
It's like, I am going to win.
There's intention behind that.
It's a statement of intent.
So it's like a prediction, but it's also a statement of like what they're going to make happen.
Right. It's like, I will make this happen.
Yes, exactly.
I'm determined to make this happen.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about like the kind of the general ideas
Yeah.
of when to use will and going to.
The concepts behind it.
But I think it would be helpful to actually look at the sentence structure.
Yeah.
Because grammar is important.
It is.
We need to make sure we're using these correctly.
Yeah.
So maybe we can dive into the nitty-gritty.
All right.
A little bit of the grammar of how to form sentences
Let's do it.
with these two future forms.
Let's get grammatical. All right. So let's start with will.
Okay.
So if we want to make a positive sentence with will, it's actually really simple.
Okay.
We just use the subject like I
Uh-huh.
plus where
Okay.
plus the base form of the verb.
Gotcha.
So for example, I will go to the store.
Easy peasy.
Easy peasy.
Okay.
Now, if we want to make it negative,
Uh-huh.
all we do is add not after will.
Okay.
So I will not go to the store.
Right.
And then to make a question,
Okay.
we invert will and the subject.
So it becomes,
So will you go to the store?
will you go to the store? Okay.
Exactly.
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward.
And what about going to?
Going to is a little bit more complex,
Okay.
but not too bad.
Okay.
So for a positive sentence with going to, we start with subject.
Mhm.
I. Okay. Then we use the appropriate form of the verb to be.
Okay.
So in this case, it would be am, I am,
Gotcha.
then going to,
Uh-huh.
and then the base form of the verb.
Okay. So I am going to eat dinner.
Perfect.
Okay.
To make it negative,
Uh-huh.
you simply add not after the form of to be.
So am.
So I am not going to eat dinner.
Okay.
And then to make a question,
Okay.
we invert the subject in the form of to be.
Okay.
So are you going to eat dinner?
Are you going to eat dinner?
Yes.
Gotcha.
So it's a little bit longer than will,
Yeah.
but the structure's still pretty basic.
Yeah, it makes sense.
You just got to remember that extra to be verb in there.
Yes. Yes.
That's the key.
And the podcast actually gives like a bunch more examples of these different forms.
Oh, that's good.
Which I thought was really helpful because sometimes it's like you hear the rule, but then you need to see it.
Yeah, you need to see it in action
Exactly.
to really understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of understanding it, they also have a section in the podcast about common mistakes.
Ooh, that's always helpful.
Yeah. I love these sections because it's like, what are the things that we usually mess up?
Yeah, where are we going wrong?
Yeah.
What are the pitfalls?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the mistakes that they point out is forgetting that to be a verb
Ah, yes.
with going to.
So easy to do.
It is so, you might say like, I going to the beach instead of I am going to the beach.
Yeah,
And honestly, I've done that.
I think we all have,
It's so easy to do, especially when you're speaking quickly.
especially in casual conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
It just slips out.
Another mistake that they pointed out was using will when going to would be more appropriate.
Okay.
So, for example, saying, I will visit my family this weekend,
Mm-hmm.
when you actually already have plans to visit them.
Right, you've already made that decision.
Yes.
You're not just thinking about it.
Exactly. So in that case, it should be, I am going to visit my family.
Right, because it's a plan.
Yes.
It's an intention.
It's not just a spontaneous thought. It's like a predetermined thing.
So again, it comes back to that context.
Context.
What do you want to express?
Always. So I think it would be really helpful to actually see these two in action, like in a dialogue.
Yeah, I think so too.
So the podcast has this great little dialogue that
That's
shows how these two are used in a natural conversation.
Awesome.
So do you want to kind of set the scene?
Sure. So imagine two friends are talking and they're making plans for the weekend.
Okay.
And one friend asks, what are you going to do this weekend?
Okay, so right away we see going
We do,
for a plan.
for a plan, an intention.
Okay, cool.
What about you?
I'm going to visit my family. What about you?
I think I'll go hiking. But if it rains, I'll stay home and read.
So now we have will,
We do.
and it's for a couple different things here.
It is.
So first we have, I think I'll go hiking.
Right. That's a spontaneous decision.
Yes.
They're not sure yet.
Yeah, it's like in the moment I'm thinking about it.
Exactly. And then they say, but if it rains, I'll stay home and read.
So that's a conditional.
It is.
It's like if this happens, then this will happen.
Right. So we're using will in that situation as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then the conversation ends with, that's a good plan. Do you think it's going to rain?
Right. So they're switching back to going to.
Yeah.
But this time it's for a prediction
A prediction, yeah.
based on what they think the weather might be.
Yeah, and I think this dialogue is so helpful because it shows you how, like, it's not always black and white. It's
Right.
like sometimes you can use will, sometimes you can use going to.
And it can shift even within the same conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Depending on what you want to express.
That's all about the nuance.
Nuance.
That's what makes English fun.
It does make it fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the grammar. We've looked at an example dialogue.
Uh-huh.
What do you think about trying some practice activities?
Oh, I love practice activities.
Yeah, it's a good way to solidify what we've learned.
Absolutely.
So the podcast actually has a couple of activities
Oh, cool.
that we can try.
Awesome.
So the first one is a fill-in-the-blank exercise,
Okay.
where you have to choose between will or going
Gotcha.
to complete the sentences.
Love it.
Yeah, and it really makes you think about the context
Yeah.
and why you would choose one over the other.
Oh, I bet.
And then they also have a matching exercise
Mm.
where you have to match sentences
Right.
to their meanings.
Okay.
So is it a plan?
Uh-huh.
Is it a prediction?
Yeah.
Is it an offer?
Gotcha.
A promise?
So it's all about understanding the speaker's intention.
Exactly.
Okay, that's cool.
And they provide answers for both exercises.
Oh, good.
So you can check your work.
Make sure we're on the right track.
Exactly.
Okay, this is all fantastic.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious, like, how do we actually take all this knowledge and use it in real life?
That's a great question.
Like, it's one thing to do exercises
Right.
and understand the grammar,
It's another thing to actually speak.
but how do we actually speak it?
Right.
So the podcast actually gives a few suggestions,
Oh, cool.
which I think are really practical.
Right.
One of them is role playing.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, so they suggest, like, get together with a friend
Okay.
and practice having conversations like the one that we just went over
Oh, that's a great idea.
about weekend plans.
It's low pressure.
Yeah.
You can make mistakes and it's fine.
Exactly. And you can kind of get comfortable using those different forms.
In a natural setting.
In a natural setting, exactly. In
Yeah.
a natural setting, exactly.
Yeah, and you know what else they suggest?
What's that?
Writing about your future goals.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, so think about things you want to achieve,
Okay.
big or small,
Mm-hmm.
and write about them using will
Yeah.
and going to.
Yeah. So, like, I'm going to finish that novel I've been working on.
Exactly.
Or I will travel to Italy next year.
Perfect.
Oh, that.
It's a great way to practice the grammar,
Yeah.
but also to kind of visualize those goals.
Yeah. And it's a little bit more personal, too.
It is.
It's not just like filling in blanks on a worksheet.
Right, it's about your own life.
It's about your dreams,
Yeah.
your aspirations.
And I think that can be really motivating
Absolutely.
to actually use the language
Yeah.
to express those things.
And you know what else is motivating?
What's that?
Speaking those goals out loud. Like, don't just write them down.
Say them.
Say them.
Because language is meant to be spoken.
It is.
It's not just about writing.
We have to practice actually saying these things.
Exactly. The more you practice,
Yeah.
the more natural it will become.
Totally.
So don't be shy.
Get out there and speak.
Speak your future into existence.
I love that.
Right.
Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've really gone deep
Deep dive.
into will and going
Into the future
into the future.
of English.
We talked about the differences between them, nuances. The nuances.
Yeah.
The different situations where you might use one or the other.
The grammar.
The grammar.
The common mistakes.
The mistakes.
And most importantly, how to actually use them
In real life.
in real life.
Yeah. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that it's not as simple as we might think.
It's not.
There's a lot of depth there.
There is
And it really comes down to understanding the context
always the context.
and the speaker's intention.
Right. What do you want to say? How do
Exactly.
you want to say it?
Yeah. So I hope this has been helpful for everyone.
I hope so too.
And I would encourage you to think about your own conversations.
Yeah.
Think about the things that you say.
Paid attention.
Pay attention to how you use will in
Sure.
going to
And why.
and why.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure,
Go back to this deep dive.
listen again,
Review the rules.
practice the exercises.
And keep learning.
Keep learning.
Because that's what it's all about.
That's the fun part.
Right.
So until next time, happy learning, everyone.
Happy learning.